You're listening to Honey and Hustle, a video podcast that inspires the dreamers, creators, and hustlers to make a business from their passions. I'm Angela Hollowell, and I'm a visual storyteller based in Durham, North Carolina. I sit down with creative entrepreneurs, nonprofit founders, and small business owners as they share their stories, the lessons they've learned throughout their careers, and how they've worked to make a positive impact. Hey everyone, we are filming season 3 of the Honey and Hustle podcast live at the Durham Bottling Co. right in downtown Durham. We're about to get into a great conversation, but before we do that, I'd really appreciate it if you take a moment to share this episode with someone who you think might get some value from it. Feel free to tag me on the podcast on social media, and I'll be sure to put those links on the video and in the description below. If you're listening to the show, please consider leaving us a review on Podchaser, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. It helps others find the show and lets me know how I'm doing at this video podcast thing. If you'd like to support the show, be sure to check out our affiliate links, shop our merch, and subscribe to the Honeypot newsletter and this YouTube channel, all at the links in the description. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, taking it back to kind of the beginning, you're living in Durham now, but you were working on Wilmington on Fire, the original film in this series, under your independent film company, Spell Street. So, can you tell me a little bit about how you found that story, and how you decided to go about not only creating it and bringing it to life in your own way, but distributing it and getting people's eyes on it, making people aware that this is what happened.
Right. Well, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, and a lot of people don't know this, that I started off doing acting and modeling. And I was about 100 pounds lighter, back in those days. But, I did pretty well. I did some cool commercial stuff in New York, in Georgia as well. That's what made me want to make the move. So I said, you know what, let me kind of stop doing that, and I wanted to start to tell my own stories and make my own films. And I was familiar with the 1898 massacre story, but I also saw that no one actually did a documentary on it. And I was a huge fan of John Singleton's Rosewood, and also another documentary called Banished by Marco Williams. And it's an excellent documentary, similar to Wilmington on Fire, but his documented 3 racial massacres in Georgia and Arkansas. And so I said, you know what? Let me do something on the Wilmington Massacre. And so that's what we did. And I decided then that I wanted to launch this film, with my production company that I just started, Spell Street. And the rest is history. It was really, we have no budget, couldn't get no funding. And so I was able to get some talented individuals that believed in me. And I knew that it would probably be a one and done situation, with these guys, because they were very talented. And just off of just their reels and their ideas, I was like, man, these guys are going to blow up. And so they did after Wilmington on Fire. They're working in Hollywood right now, but we had a great experience. And I'm actually thinking about writing a book about the experience, and they want to get involved with that and just talk about how that experience helped them grow and further their careers. And so, that's how we did it. I reached out to, different researchers, certain direct descendants of the victims of the 1898 massacre, and we made it happen. It was like a 3-year process of shooting everything. Ooh. But since this was my first film, I forgot that you needed post-production funds, editing and coloring and scoring and all that. So I was just, trying to figure out how I'm gonna finish paying for this thing. But luckily, out the blue, you never know who's watching and following you. And so David West, who's a retired NBA player now, he was playing with the Indiana Pacers at the time. He reached out and said, man, I heard about your film, and is it available on DVD yet? I said, well, He said, well, man, how much do you need to get this thing finished? Because he's really into Black history, Black culture. He's from Garner, North Carolina as well. Okay. And so I said, man, I need like X amount. He said, well, let's talk about it. And so, me talking to his business partner, back and forth, I didn't believe it. I was like, man, what? And I was living in Laurinburg at the time, because I had moved from Atlanta back to Laurinburg to work on this project. And I was like, man, I'm from Laurinburg. I know this dude in the NBA who I was a fan of anyway. I know he's not paying attention to me. And so they come to town to play the Charlotte basketball team. And they say, look, man, come up, we got you a ticket, hang out at the game, and then I'm gonna introduce you to David, and we'll talk about it more. So I bet. So it's my first time going to an NBA game. I'm nervous, plus excited. I was like, man, I can't mess this up, because this is my opportunity to get the funds I need.
Yeah.
And so, I went to the game, chopped it up. After the game, he introduced me to David West. We talked. He said, yo, I want to partner with you on this. Let's do it. And my guy's going to write the check for you. And that's how we got it made.
Okay. Yeah. But I think it's important to note that, like, you had done most of the legwork at that point.
Yeah.
And I think that luck is something you can't predict. But like you said, it's like you got to put in the reps, put in the time.
You got to. And then, during this time, while I was filming and trying to raise funds, I didn't let nobody know that I was struggling with it. Yeah. I saw what a lot of rappers would do. They would go on the radio, promote singles, say, hey, my album's coming out in a few months, but it doesn't come out. So I was like, let me do the same thing. Get all this promotion, get on every radio show, podcast, blog that I can to promote. And it helped, because he actually checked out one of those blog posts. And I think it was Mark Anthony Neal's Left of Black series. And Mark's a good friend of mine. He actually introduced us. And because David had reached out to him to ask him about that film, Wilmington on Fire, because he follows his blog. And Mark Anthony Neal hit me up. Said, man, David West reached out to me, man. He's interested in possibly getting involved. Said, man, hook us up. And that's how it happened.
Nice, yeah. And just to note, for people who don't know who Mark Anthony Neal is, he's a professor at Duke. I forget which department.
He's over the African American Studies department at Duke University. Yes.
And his show is still going to this day.
Left of Black. Great show.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's on YouTube. So for you guys that are watching on YouTube, check out that after you watch this. I'll put a link down in the description.
Definitely.
But going back to that partnership, so that got you to finish the film, and then now the film has been doing great. There's been a lot of eyes on that film. So can you talk to me about how you went about not only like getting awareness for it as you were making it, but distributing the film and getting eyes on it?
Well, when the film, got finished and when we got the funding, it was time to premiere it. And so I decided to premiere it in Wilmington, and it's a festival called the Cucalores Film Festival. It's real big, and it's one of the top film festivals in Wilmington. And the reason why I wanted to do it, one, because it was a big festival there. Then also they usually have the festival during the actual week of when the massacre happened. The massacre happened November 10th. And that festival usually goes on during that time. I said, man, this would be great promotion. I know I'll get all the promo. Everybody will be excited about it. And so what we did it, promoted it, and we ended up having the festival's most attended screening ever. 600 people in Thalian Hall. And plus, we had 300 people on the outside that couldn't get in. It was crazy. People scalping tickets. People, trying to sell their tickets online. It was just a cool experience. And it was my first time talking in front of people. So 600 people, first screening, I'm just nervous, couldn't speak, But, over time, as I did more screenings, you figure out that everybody asks you the same questions. And so that was the first ever experience. And then I said, you know what? All these people that couldn't get in, let me rent this same venue the next month. And so, I convinced a friend of mine to, give me a grand to rent the venue, and we packed it out again. And then I did the same thing at UNCW, Keenan Auditorium, the following month in January, packed it out again. And I said, let me take this thing on the road throughout North Carolina. So we came up here to Durham, packed out the Hayti Center, went to Goldsboro, packed it out there, and then Charlotte, packed it out there, and then it just started rolling. And then, started to submit to different festivals. We won a big award at the Pan-African Film Festival in LA, which was cool. And then we just kept rolling and rolling. And it just started just picking up steam everywhere. Celebrities were shouting it out, especially recently during the pandemic, when we first went on lockdown. And George Floyd was murdered, and people were talking about removing Confederate monuments. we started getting a lot of shout outs. Jason Weaver, the actor, he shouted us out, told people to watch it. And also Hillary Burton Morgan, that used to be an actress on One Tree Hill back in the day.
Okay.
And her husband is Jeffrey Dean Morgan for the Walking Dead folks who fans. That's her husband. And she gave me a huge shout out. And she interviewed me on her IG Live talk as well.
Nice.
And she wanted to get involved in part 2. She heard I was doing the sequel and wanted to support. And so she came on board as an EP, executive producer. And that's been a cool experience as well, because she has a huge reach and audience. And so I've been gaining support not only with the first one still, but the upcoming second one as well. And so it's been embraced by a lot of Hollywood folks. And I never imagined that, me just being from North Carolina, doing this small budget film, but it ended up really inspiring a lot of folks, across the globe, with this story, with this film.
Yeah, so documentaries can serve a lot of different purposes. And I think Netflix, with the rise of documentaries that are available on Netflix, there has been a more positive correlation associated with documentaries. But there is definitely a time where documentaries are like these boring educational films that nobody really saw as entertainment or inspiring or those type of things. So I think with the rise of independent filmmakers who are putting their own spin and own perspective on the purpose of a documentary film, in terms of both entertainment and inspiration in addition to education, we're seeing a different kind of connotation being associated with documentaries. And then even used in smaller forms, a short documentary and docuseries has been on the rise. So like the feature-length documentary is not the only thing that's associated with that genre now of filmmaking. So when we talk about, you're like, okay, I saw the success from Wilmington on Fire 1. I want to do a part 2 because there's more of the story to be told, and you wanted to branch out and do another film that you have coming out in spring of 2023. What was kind of the idea behind that, and how did you take what you learned from the first film and apply that to the films that you're working on now?
Well, I know what I took from the first one was that the success of the first one brought in some revenue. And so I said, you know what, I got a budget now. With the second one, I got some support, got a budget. Let's step our quality up as well. Because, the first one, people will give me a pass. But if I continue to make those same production mistakes going forward, no. Because, I put myself in as a consumer as well. I want a quality product. And so I said, you know what, we're going to have to step our game up, production-wise. And then with the second one, I wanted to make something that felt complete. The first Wilmington on Fire, all history about the 1898 massacre. And so with part 2, since going there for all those years, filming, meeting my wife there as well, and just meeting some great people, I always felt like I needed to show the community today and what the community is doing to make the city better and get it out of that shadow of the 1898 massacre. And that's what part 2 is about. So it's more of a verite focused approach. And to me, I think that's needed. And I wanted to show African Americans solving their own problems and pulling themselves up to make those changes in the community. And that's why I decided to do it in that way. And then also martial arts. I'm a big fan of that. Studied as a kid. And my teacher actually learned from the guy that I'm doing the documentary on, Grandmaster Vic Moore. And it was an honor to be able to do that, filming that for about 3 years now. Going to finally put it out next year, and being able to be a part of the Firelight Media Fellowship as well by the legendary Stanley Nelson. That's his doc lab. And so having that project a part of that has been a huge blessing. And really telling that different type of story of African American history and culture, because we rarely discuss anything about Black folks in martial arts. And Grandmaster Moore, since he's here in North Carolina, and he was like one of the first Black professional karate champions in the United States, and he's still teaching to this day. I was like, you know what, I need to get this man his flowers while he's still here. And so he's loving it. It's really energized him, re-energized him, as well as his organization is growing because of the stuff we've been doing. And everyone's excited about it. And it's a very different film than Wilmington on Fire. I know when I first told people about it, they're like, okay, why are you doing that? And I was like, because it's more stories to our community than just getting killed by white folks.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I wanted to do something. Even part 2 of Wilmington on Fire is very different than the first one, you know, and then also Grandmaster is totally different. But I wanted to do something that was more about Black empowerment, how we use the martial arts as a way of empowerment and to strengthen our communities and just be better overall in general, and just what martial arts can do for a community. And I wanted to show that. And also showing these 2 young guys that he's been working with for quite some time as well, passing that knowledge on to them. And that project, I'm really excited about it. And really, you know, can't wait for the world to see it as well.
So in a way, what I'm kind of hearing with this martial arts film especially is talking about the different forms that generational wealth can take. You know, because it's not just money. I mean, money is definitely a big part of that, but it's also how we perceive money, how we perceive skills, how we perceive our intellect, how we perceive our own ability to excel in society in every sense. And so that's a really good take on that I think definitely needs to be shared, and definitely is kind of different from the, you know, we need to have our own a new Black Wall Street. We need to have a new, and there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that at all.
There's nothing wrong with that.
We need that.
But there's different ways that we can go about creating prosperity in our communities and organizing within our communities and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'm really interested in that. And I think from the sports take too, it's kind of like a, you know, we talk about, you know, when I would say when popular culture thinks about Black excellence, they think about, you know, musicians, they think about, you know, athletes, and there's something to that, right? But I don't think those conversations are being had publicly about what it means to be a person of influence and also create wealth through those means. So.
And you know, those guys, from men and women, during this era of martial arts, they were heroes in these communities. Like Grandmaster Moore, he started off in Cincinnati, so you had people like him in Cincinnati. He was like the hero for the African American community in Cincinnati. Then you had people in Chicago, New York, you know, with Moses Powell and those guys. So they were like our superheroes because they could do all these amazing things like break bricks. And, you know, Grandmaster Moore, we have some footage of him chopping a potato off a guy's neck. You know, so they would do, you know, these guys were our superheroes, you know, in these communities. And so, you know, we want to talk about that as well, and just how it's not like that anymore. You know, karate has kind of went away in our community, and you know, we're more focused on football, basketball. There's nothing wrong with that, but this was our thing at one time, and it's just I just wanted to show how martial arts has played an important part in our culture and community. Just, you know, just looking at the music, Wu-Tang and all this other stuff, how it's played a big part in our culture, and how we, you know, need to bring that back somewhat.
And where is this film taking place?
Well, he lives in Delco, North Carolina. So majority of it takes place in Delco, and then 2 of his students that we've been documenting, one is in Kinston, North Carolina, the other one is in Columbia. But we've actually traveled to Miami a few times because one of his students is a top world karate champion. So we went to Miami for a big tournament that he had a few years ago. And we've also filmed other people that have studied under him. We actually are going to his hometown, Cincinnati, in a few months to finish up filming there. And so he's going to show us, you know, where he grew up, where he first learned karate, where he opened up, because Grandmaster Moore actually opened up the first karate school in Cincinnati back in the 60s. And then, you know, just show us where he actually learned karate, because a lot of those guys from that era learned from, you know, a lot of the Black soldiers who had fought in World War II that were over in Okinawa and stuff like that. They learned some judo, some karate here and there, and was able to kind of piece together what they learned. And when they came back to the United States, they would, you know, get like, you know, a warehouse building and then just start teaching kids. And that's how Grandmaster Moore learned from this guy named Ron Williams, who was in the Marines back then. And he learned a little bit of some stuff from Okinawa and then came back to Cincinnati. And he started teaching Grandmaster Moore and a few other kids in the community. And that's how he got his start. And so we want to, you know, have him go back to his old town and just show us these places. And then another guy, one of his top former students, Michael Awad, we're going to be interviewing him. And he has a huge storage unit of a whole bunch of old photos and everything. And so they haven't seen each other in years. And so we're going to kind of bring them together just to talk about how strict as well of a teacher Grandmaster Moore was, but also what it did for him, and his brothers as well, who actually under Grandmaster Moore became one of the top karate guys in Cincinnati and throughout the whole state of Ohio. It was all because of Grandmaster Moore.
Gotcha.
So,
Gotcha. Okay. Sounds like a really good story developing here. A lot more of that community aspect coming out as more characters come into play. So, with all that being said, you're still operating under Speller Street Films. And one of the things that you talk to independent filmmakers about through your work through that and through the Southern Documentary Fund and your work at Duke Center for Documentary Studies is not only creating a good film, but how are you going to get people to see that film? And you said you just kind of learned from what other people were doing, which is like...
Yeah, so like musicians, you know, people like French Montana, Currency, you know, people that I was a fan of that built like a grassroots following. And I said, you know what, let me tweak it a little bit and let me do this with film, because you got to realize I was living in Laurinburg when I did Wilmington on Fire, so I wasn't in a big city. I was in a small rural town, so I had to figure out how the internet worked, how to build some audience, because I wasn't in a big town like New York, Atlanta no more, you know what I'm saying? So I had to figure out some things and just try to utilize the internet. And the beauty of it is the internet really has helped a lot with what we've done over the years. And I remember when people, they was like, I'm not doing social media. I'm like, you have to do it. And it's changed now, you know, because of the different algorithms, they've been changed up. But back then, a few years ago, oh man, it was free reign. And you can just promote, market, and meet so many great people. And that's how people like David West and others found out about me, was the internet. And so it opened the door. And a lot of these connections that I made over the years, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to make them. I would have to actually be in New York or LA and hopefully run into some of these people, you know, by chance. But the internet has really opened the door to make those connections and build that audience. And I think filmmakers need to continue to embrace that. You know, so I'm always, you know, meeting interesting people, networking, doing interviews, the whole nine. You know, it's a nonstop process, and you have to grind it out just like an independent artist, because you're an independent artist and you have to think that way and always think outside the box as well.
Oh no, so there's one more question I want to ask you about that, but I do just want to touch on, so I think like when I first got into photography and filmmaking and started looking for places for inspiration for how to approach certain things, how to approach marketing, how to approach creating, how to approach finding my style and everything. One of the people that I always looked at was Missy Elliott, and how Missy Elliott was never afraid to look at different things for inspiration. And you can see how her impact has lasted through this day, and she was so ahead of her time even then, and even now some of the stuff that she's made has never been replicated. So I think it's interesting that you were like, don't just look at people who are in your field, but look at other artists
outside the box. And then, you know, you can still look at people in your field. Like I think Spike was an inspiration to me, not for the filmmaking, it was for how he did his merch. Because I remember when he had first did his films, you know, he had Spike's joint, and he has it online now, but he had his own storefront where he sold his the t-shirts for his movies, the posters, the VHSs, books, you know, so any Spike stuff that you wanted, you can get directly from him. And that's a revenue stream. And so he does it now as well. You know, it's online. He has an online store, Spike's joint. But looking at that, I was like, man, you know what? I need to have some merch. And I need to have some shirts, some posters, some things like that where I can actually sell. And a lot of times you can make some good money. It's a good revenue stream. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, looking at Spike over those years and how he's continuing to do that, and still it really is one of the only ones in Hollywood that's still doing it, because he had that entrepreneurial, you know, spirit as well, where he had two spots. He had one in New York. He also had one in LA, two storefronts that sold all this stuff. And so now, you know, he made the transition just doing everything online. But it's that model, you know, that was really inspiring to say, you know what, you can't make a lot of money off the film, but you can use the film to sell other things. And so he really mastered that.
I know, I think it's interesting. I'm not saying you copy this, but I'm just saying that Spike Lee just released a book. I don't know if you've seen it yet. So you're like, I'm making a book. Like, okay.
But you know, I've always wanted to do it, just off of my experience doing Wilmington on Fire, and it's really, it's going to be called Wilmington on Fire: The Making of a Movement. We actually created a movement, around it, and so the folks that were behind the first one and the second one, we just want to come together and do this book, and probably do like a little short doc as well.
Okay.
Because it really changed our lives, but not only our lives, but the community in Wilmington as well.
Yeah.
So
just a quick question on this. So going back to the George Floyd, kind of the beginning of that outburst of social movement and stuff like that, were you aware of what happened in Wilmington with the new police chief when she was kind of running through the tapes of recorded police car conversations, and there was a recording?
Yeah, see, we were there. We were there during this time because, see, Wilmington on Fire 2, we started off during the protest that they had there, and one of the young ladies that was behind that became pretty much the leader of that. She's one of the main folks in Wilmington on Fire 2, and so during this time, you had, they had like these standoffs against the police, and then, like a month later, that's when that recording came out, talking about how they wanted to kill the protesters, one, and also just kill black people in the community there in general. And, we were there to kind of document those responses, and we were trying to push for them, not only us as a film company, but the NAACP and other activists was trying to get the judge to release the audio, because, he wouldn't do it. They just released the transcript. And we wanted to say, nah, release the audio as well. Judge wouldn't do it, And this is around the time that, the new police chief that came on, Donnie Williams. And he, I think like his first week or so, dealing with that. And it was crazy, because I know that we've actually captured some stuff, that the police department was doing to the protesters. And so I reached out to the police department and said, hey, I want to get a balanced side. Can we actually document some stuff that you guys are trying to do better? Just to have a good balance. They didn't want to get involved or participate. So I said, well, you guys are looking bad out here. And so, hey, it is what it is. I try to give you an opportunity.
Yeah.
But it was one young lady. She actually worked at the police department, and she reached out years ago, and she was a big advocate of the film, and she wanted to use the film for the police academy training for new hires. I said, yeah, let's do it. I think that'd be great. And so she was really a huge supporter, and I wanted to film her for part 2 to show what she's doing, but I had to go through the police department first, and they didn't want her to do it. And so, she was really disappointed. But I say it is what it is. But I do respect you for wanting to do the right thing and to try to make a difference, even though you're not getting the full support from the department. So we were there for a lot of that stuff. We were there when, a few of those rallies that were there, they had like a big Back the Blue rally that was out there. We were there for a lot of the Trump supporters. When Trump came to town, we went out there to interview people. It was wild. So we documented a lot of this stuff over the past year and a half. So that's why I'm very excited for folks to check out the film.
Okay. So going back to the distribution part of this is film festivals, so not just social media, but film festivals. So what is your approach to doing a successful film festival circuit for a film?
Well, it depends. I tell filmmakers all the time. I know a lot of times filmmakers, they want to go to Sundance and Tribeca, South by. I worked at a film festival, Full Frame, for years, and they're up there. It's one of the top doc festivals in the world. It's tough to get in. It's tough. And I tell filmmakers all the time, if you don't get into these top festivals, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that your film is bad or nothing. It just might not fit, what they're trying to do. You have different programmers, they have different tastes, and also I don't expect some of these top tier festivals to really resonate with my work, because my work is for our people. Now if you want to check it out, it's cool. But I don't, just like with some films that I see, I'm like, man, I'm not interested in that. You know what I'm saying? So if I had a festival, I probably wouldn't program it either. You know what I'm saying? So I always go with the approach of finding out what type of film you have. So if you have something that's focused on Black history or Black culture, look for those festivals like the Pan-African Film Festival or the North Carolina Black Film Festival, the Hayti Festival here in Durham. Reach out to those folks, because a lot of times they're looking for quality Black films, especially docs. So reach out to those folks, man, and a lot of times not only will they show your film at the festival, they'll bring you back during the year to do a screening series or something and pay you some money, you know, a screening fee as well. And so that's what I've done over the years, is try to grow with our own festivals and grow with them. And, you know, if other people reach out, want to do something, let's do it. But that's how I try to do it. I try to find out, I try to look for festivals that kind of share the same theme as my films, you know. And then also just do your own screenings as well. You know, film festivals, you know, aren't the end of the world. But you can kind of figure out what really works for you and fits for you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That's a great note to end on. I really appreciate you coming through today.
Thank you.
Where can people find your films that are coming out soon and just find out more about Wilmington on Fire if they haven't seen it yet?
Spellerstreet.com. Spellerstreet.com, got everything there, got the merch store where you can buy Wilmington on Fire, you can stream Wilmington on Fire, and it has all the social media links where you can keep up with everything we got going on.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate it.
Nah, thank you.
All right. Yeah, I think we